Hello and welcome to A Little Crafting. My name is Annie and this is my, I guess, monthly podcast now where I talk about all the things that I have been making. So usually that consists of knitting, weaving, spinning, sewing, yarn dyeing and quilting as well. The most frequent craft that I partake in is usually knitting, as that's kind of my consistent go-to at the moment. And I am recording this from the southeast of England in Surrey, which is just southwest of London for anyone who doesn't know the country very well. And today is Sunday the 15th of January. It's been about a month since I last recorded, and I did record an episode last week but decided not to use it in the end because it wasn't very long and I didn't have that much content to actually show you. So I have a little bit more this week and I'm hoping that it will be a good episode. If you want to find me on social media, I'm A_little on Instagram and Ankiwoo on Ravelry as well. And I'll start off with a little introduction to what I am wearing. This is the Throwback cardigan by Andrea Mowry. And this is the lovely colour work section. And what I've ended up doing, because I didn't like the look of the way that it kind of gaped open the cardigan itself in the way that it was originally designed to, I decided to take off the button bands that didn't have buttons on anyway and insert a zip, and that was done about a year ago now. I knit it in 2020, finished it in December and then adjusted it in 2021. I would say I really love the colour work on this pattern. If I had waited and seen that Andrea Mowry was going to release a sweater pattern for this kind of colour work motif, which is the throw over, I would have waited and probably purchased that pattern instead of the cardigan one. But I love this colour work motif so much that that's why I ended up purchasing the cardigan when it was first available. The yarn is West Yorkshire Spinners Croft in the Aran and then the Tweed Aran for one of the colours just on here, and I'll link to my Ravelry page in terms of that, giving you the specific colourways that I used, as it was a couple of years ago now. I don't remember exactly, but I would say after sort of not wearing this too long, I wouldn't recommend this yarn for a sweater pattern or anything like that where you're just knitting stockinette and you haven't got any other structure to it. It hasn't held up particularly well. Firstly, whilst I haven't worn it a huge amount, it's pilled quite a lot and I've had to depill it a couple of times. It's washed a couple of times as well, but I've only hand washed it and yet it looks a little bit like I've stuck it in the washing machine, and it's kind of got very baggy and unstructured, and I'm not sure whether that's because of the way the pattern is and the loose gauge in the pattern originally, because it was supposed to be this kind of light open cardigan, or whether it's my gauge or whether it's the yarn. So I plan on purchasing the throw over version and knitting myself a sweater, probably in a different yarn, and I will go for the Pradera Natura Gilliatt that I tend to kind of automatically gravitate towards when I'm knitting a sweater as well. It was good practice inserting a zip. I haven't done it especially well. What I will also do with this cardigan is actually spend a bit of time just doing some TLC. So I've ordered, following recommendation from Lana Tricot, who is a French podcaster. Well, I think she's partly Spanish as well, or possibly fully Spanish, but she lives in France and has a yarn shop in Grenoble, which is quite near to where my grandmother and my family are. in the southeast of France. So she, on her podcast in French, recommended a de-pillar called Steamery Pilo 1, and what I've ended up doing is ordering one of those because she really recommended it very highly, and I'll test that out on this sweater, also give it a good wash, and then do a little bit of a review sometime in the next couple of weeks to say how it's turned out and kind of show you the difference between the before and after, and see if it makes any difference, because ultimately I don't feel comfortable wearing this sweater outside anymore. It's baggy in the wrong places. This part is great, the rest in terms of the body is not so much, and I've noticed things like there's obviously pilling going on, but then some of the yarn looks a bit like it's, you know, stretched out a lot and it's kind of gone through the wars basically. So let's see how that turns out, but I wanted to wear this today anyway and talk a little bit about my experience at least, because it is a beautiful pattern, and it was one that I knit fairly early on in terms of my sweater knitting experience, and it was a flat piece of colour work for the top part, which is really awkward as it turns out, and I think that actually went surprisingly well, this part. But yeah, I'll see if I can knit the throw over so that I don't feel so bad about sort of having this in the corner of my cupboard and not really ever wearing it. And let's see how it turns out if I manage to recover it a little bit more once I've got a couple of things done. Without further ado, I will move on to finished objects. So also Happy New Year to all of my followers and anyone who is coming and watching this podcast for the first time. It's now 2023, which really freaks me out because I'm constantly writing the date as 2022, and I can't believe I started this podcast in 2020 or 2021, I think. I feel like I need to go back and figure that out. So yeah, I'll pop that in the description below and just clarify when I started this podcast. But it feels like it's been a long time already. I'm not as prolific a podcaster as I used to be though. So anyway, I digress. Finished objects. So I had a mammoth task of knitting 5 pairs of Carapins by Rosa Pomar, which is from the 52 Weeks of Socks books published by Liner magazine, before Christmas, in time to give my family and friends their Christmas gifts. And I did manage to knit the 5 pairs. So I knit 4 pairs for my family. That was my dad, mum, sister and her partner. And in various different sizes, so there are only 2 sizes in the pattern, and I decided to knit the larger size for the men and the smaller size for the women, and luckily it turned out perfectly. What I opted to do, so this is a pattern which you knit in bulky weight yarn, you then felt slightly to kind of shrink in so that you've got a lovely slipper which is nice and rigid, but I opted not to felt the socks. That is because when I tried those on both my husband and myself, they seem to be at the limit in terms of sizing. My sister has a larger foot than me, my mum has a foot the size of my husband's, my dad's is larger, and my sister's partner's is even larger than that as well. So I didn't want to felt the socks for them to become smaller and therefore not be so well fitted on the foot. So I did those 4 initially, and my sisters were okay. They were the first ones that I knit, but I did end up opting to reinforce the toe a bit because she when she was putting those slippers on, the yarn was kind of splitting about at the toe, so that it was making holes effectively. So what I did was I reinforced the foot, and I will check with her if that did work, and if not, I'll end up probably knitting her a slightly in between size with the same yarn that I have some left over of. Whilst I've been talking, should have popped a picture just up here so that you can see those socks, or those Carapins, all finished up and ready to wrap. The last pair that I made was for my best friend, and she has the same size feet as me, so I was comfortable with slightly felting them to make sure that they had that rigidity. And I haven't got a picture of those, unfortunately, but I can show you mine, my single one. One second. So this is a blue one rather than the pink, the cyclamen colour that I used for hers, but this is kind of how it turns out once you've felted these slightly. And what I did was I popped the two slipper socks under the tap a little bit, and then popped them in the dryer for, I think it was 15 minutes. And then took them out and checked. If they weren't quite felted enough, I'd put them back in. So I think I ended up doing that for half an hour, but obviously depending on your washing machine make, your dryer, etc., it would be slightly different potentially. But yeah, I do love the way that these are turned out. The other ones are just more obviously hand knit, I would say. So there's not as much evenness across the fabric when they're not felted like this. But the lovely single knit stitch detail along the side also stands out a little bit more before they're felted. The yarn I used was Hamelton Tweed 2 and Hamelton number 2, both by BC Garn. I have the tags here. So this is what the Hamelton Tweed 2 label looks like, and this is a bulky weight pure wool, although the tweed has a bit of viscose in it for the tweedy knits. And then this one is the Hamelton 2, and the Hamelton 2 has been discontinued, but the tweed continues to be available. I have a stash still of the Hamelton 2 to make sure I have enough to make a few more slipper socks over the next couple of years as well, because I do love the pattern and they are really cozy. I knit these on 5mm needles, but I do tend to have to go down in size, so I'd recommend looking at the pattern, doing a gauge swatch, and just getting an idea of what needle size you should be using as well if you try this pattern out. And the colours I used were so a navy in the tweed. This is a natural colour, which is colourway 100. There was also a natural tweed colour that I paired with graphite, which was kind of a grey colour. And then I used royal blue, and cyclamen was the pink. But you'll see in the photos of the 4 that I gifted to my family which colour combos I ended up having. I still do need to double check with my friend whether hers fit her, but I will also report back accordingly and ask her to take a photo. Hopefully one with them on her feet would be amazing. So that's what I kept myself busy with in the run up to Christmas and the festive season. And I've also got a couple of other finished objects that I finished after that. So let me put this away. The first one is my Monster Pradera wrap. So this is it all rolled up. Okay, and again I'll pop a picture here of me actually wearing it so you can see all of the colours in their glory. But this is a free pattern by Jocelyn Tunney, and it is a chevron shaped scarf. So hopefully you can see a bit there. It's a fantastic pattern, really nice and straightforward, but with a little bit of interest to create this chevron shape. and I have used my Cosy and Warm DK Advent Calendar from 2021 to complete this. That was an advent calendar by Beehive yarns, and I've done this in DK. It is a very, very long scarf, but that means it is super cozy. So for example, if I go to a cold country or go skiing or something like that this year, it will serve me well. I wore it the other day out. It did get very, very hot because it's still not that cold here in the UK right now. It has been colder pre-Christmas. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed knitting this pattern. I started it in February, I believe, February or March. But it's been a constant source of joy over the last year, and I'm really happy to have kept all of the colourways in one project. The other thing is, this is the first ever advent calendar that I've had where I have knit all of the skeins so far. And I've had a few over the years, and they're still kind of sitting waiting to kind of be paired with an actual project. So I'm really happy to have achieved this. Highly recommend doing this. You could also always create something like this with a fingering weight advent and a strand of mohair or sari silk, and yeah, have a really fluffy version. But it's a big cozy hug, and will serve me well on colder days. That's that one, and I'm very proud to have finished that. And then last time I talked a bit about making a gnome by Sarah Shearer, who is Imagined Landscapes on Ravelry. She creates little gnome patterns, and I do absolutely love knitting them out of mini skeins or leftovers and things like that. I have a few around the house, but the last couple I've tried to knit I haven't finished. However, I had an incentive because we are doing a sort of post-Christmas Secret Santa swap at work with my team, and I decided that I wanted to knit something, but I didn't think a hat or a headband or anything like that would be sort of interesting enough, I suppose, for something like a Secret Santa swap. So I decided to choose one of Sarah Shearer's gnome patterns, and I completed it fairly quickly. So this is Gnome, pun intended, and he is absolutely adorable. Let me do him this far back. So this little guy is Gnome, pun intended. I used some leftovers, so the gold colour for his body and arms are actually my own hand-dyed yarn, matching to one of the skeins that I've got on here, and the others are just leftovers. I believe this one was a Beehive Yarns 10 gram, and this one I think was from Mr. B's or Bird Street Yarn as they're now called. But I absolutely love his little beard and the way that that works. And I got a small bell in one of my other advent calendars, so I decided to attach it to the hat to make him a little bit more Father Christmassy or Christmassy in that way. So yeah, I haven't named him. I think it's a him. I am going to ask the recipient to name him and let me know what they think he should be called. I've ended up actually, so the bell was quite heavy. What I ended up doing was putting 6 or 8 2p pieces in the bottom here so that he could actually stand up. Trying to make him stand up in my hand is a little bit difficult, but he does stand up because of the weight of those 2p pieces. And I'm really pleased with him. I do still need to sew in the last end at the bottom, but he's effectively done and ready to give away. So I'll do that in the coming weeks at work. So there you go. And I absolutely love the kind of ripple effect on the hat. I think it's fantastic. The fact that it kind of pushes the hat over to one side. It's very, very clever. And it has spurred me on to finish one of the other gnomes that I've got languishing, or possibly knit another one, because as soon as I started knitting this, my husband said, oh, I'd like one of those, can you make a bigger version? So I'll see if I have some DK weight yarn hanging around and see if I can make one the same for him. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say. Quite a fiddly little project, but to be honest, it still works quite well if you're used to using small knitting needles. I have some Chalgu needles, DPNs, that go down to really small sizes. So I think this was on 2mm and then 2.25 for the larger size for this little guy. So there you go. I hope the bell isn't interfering with the sound, but I'll see when I edit later on. And that's my gnome. That's the last finished object I have at the moment, so let's move on to works in progress. The first one I'm going to show you is my Sophie Shawl by Petite Knit. I'm afraid it is going to be a bit of a Petite Knit day today, but this is knit in my own hand-dyed yarn in DK weight. This is organic merino. And it is non-superwash, that's the word. Bit out of practice at the moment, so it's a little bit crinkled right now, but I believe at this point I am almost halfway. What I love about this pattern is that it's very, very simple to knit, but it has a really nice edge, an I-cord edge. And I think that always finishes off a project in a really lovely way, but it's very, very simple to do. In the pattern, Petite Knit takes you through the kind of percentages that you need for making the shawl fully and using up all of the yarn. So I'm almost halfway through, I think, and then at that point I'll be decreasing in the other direction. This colour is lovely. I really could do with a pink scarf, so I'm really excited to see how this turns out in the end. And I went for the shawl pattern really because I wanted to knit something a little bit bigger than the scarf, but I think the principle in general is the same. It's quite a cheap pattern, but it's also quite basic in terms of what you have to do. So as some people would say, it's potato chippy, so you just keep going. I just have some stitch markers to remind myself which side I need to do the increases on, because I initially made quite a few mistakes with that when I wasn't concentrating. But yeah, just increasing, and then decreasing on the way back to the other end. Yeah, so really nice, lovely, simple knit. And I am using my usual higher sharp interchangeable set, 3.25mm for this DK weight yarn, but normal knitters probably have to use a larger needle size to get this gauge. I'm a very loose knitter in comparison to others now. Apologies for the crinkles again, but really happy with how this is turning out and hoping I can make some more one day just to use up some of these kind of lonely fingering weight or DK weight skeins. For my second knitting work in progress, I am working on the November vest, also by Petite Knit, and this is a kind of throw over vest. It's got an open front, it's got no sleeves, and it's quite long and it's got pockets. It is knit in brioche rib in one colour, and I am using Hedgehog Fibres Tweedy for this. So far what I've done is I've knit the back top portion, so this will go over the top of my back, and I am working on the left hand shoulder. Now, as I am a mirror knitter, I follow the instructions for the right hand shoulder for the left hand shoulder and vice versa, because I knit in the opposite direction. And I found the instructions quite tricky to read and understand, but I managed to figure it out eventually. And this, as it's a petite knit pattern, also has a lot of accompanying videos, which is perfect. For this section up here, I got very confused about how to pick up the stitches, and just watching the video made it really clear. I kept pausing and repeating sections just whilst I was actually doing the knitting to figure out what I needed to achieve. It also features a double knit brim, and I haven't done double knitting before, but I found it really intuitive and simple, especially next to the brioche knit, because it's quite a similar-ish style of knitting. In the same way as brioche, you're working every row twice. And I'm just loving this project, absolutely loving it. Apart from the occasional complexities where I'm picking up stitches and having to go in a different direction, I think the effect is absolutely beautiful, and it's just really meditative to knit, apart from those slightly more complicated bits. Like I said, the yarn is Hedgehog Tweedy, Hedgehog Fibres Tweedy, and I absolutely love it. I think I don't have my swatch here right now, but it blooms really well. This one is a mix of recycled yarn, leftovers and other bits and pieces on a merino base, and you get these gorgeous little flecks of colour throughout. I think this is going to be a really great staple piece for in between seasons. So for example, when we transition from winter to spring, that I can just wear over a collared shirt or a t-shirt or something like that, and it will just look really stylish. The fact that it has pockets is fantastic, because the one day a week I go into work, I tend to need a pocket to put my phone in, to put my card in, my debit card, just so that I can nip downstairs and get a coffee, and not actually leave the building necessarily, but just store my things somewhere without having to carry a bag. So a pocket is really helpful, and I think layered over something else, this will be really useful in the office where it's not too cold, but it can get cold because of the air conditioning. So yeah, this is where I am with my November vest. I am expecting to concentrate on this project only over the next few weeks and really get this done. This is partly because I've fallen out of love a little bit with my Weekender sweater, also by Andrea Mowry, just because I still think it's too big. I knit too long, so at the moment I've knit from bottom up to where the sleeves should be, but the body itself is quite long and probably excessively long, so I need to do some figuring out, and therefore it's on hiatus right now. The other couple of sweaters I have in progress are more summer light knits, so again they're on hold right now, and I'm loving this so much I figure why not carry on. So this is my main project for the foreseeable, and I'm also obviously knitting my Sophie Shawl alongside that. So yeah, just a final look because it's so gorgeous. And if you haven't tried brioche stitch, I urge you to do so. It is not as difficult as it seems, and it is quite meditative and intuitive once you get going. The terminology is the thing that's difficult, but if you watch a video, you'll immediately understand what you're supposed to be doing with brioche knits, brioche pearls, yarn overs, etc. that are involved within actually knitting brioche, and the effect is fabulous. I think most people who are teaching brioche classes tend to recommend 2-colour brioche first, because then you can actually see what's happening and see where the stitches differ in a bit more detail, whereas this is single colour brioche, so you can't see that difference so much between back and front. But I love the way that brioche looks when it's increased, and it just looks really nice and interesting overall. So yeah, putting that away now. It is being kept in a bag that my friend made me, and that is this lovely sweater bucket bag. Link to her shop on Etsy in the description below, although I don't think she has anything up there at the moment. She may do in the future. So I've shown you some finished objects and I've shown you some works in progress. What I will show you next is what I have planned for the future. So I freed up my Hide and a Hammer Berry No. 3 bag. This had my Pradera wrap in it, with all of the minis wound up, and it is now open for another project. So of course that meant I went and found the next project that I want to cast on. I am next going to cast on the Snaffled Shawl by Fibre Tales, and the reason for this is that it is a DK weight, colour work and steeked shawl. I will pop a picture just here whilst I talk about the yarn that I'm using. The sample was knit in John Arbon Knit by Numbers, which is pretty easy for me to get hold of, and I am actually a mill member, so I get a discount. Worth checking that out if you are interested in buying more than sort of one set of John Arbon yarn. I also spin their fibre as well. I have a number of different colours for this, and the first one, so this is Knit by Numbers DK. The first one is number 128, and it's this gorgeous berry colour, and this is just my favourite pink basically. I've got a neutral white, which is Knit by Numbers 55. There you go. I have a dark grey. This is Knit by Numbers 03. It's kind of this misty, almost black grey. And then the last colour I will be using, because I love my pink and green as per my my wedding colours, which were pink, green and gold, is this really gorgeous kind of sagey green. That is number 47. And this is how they will look all together, if I can show you. There you go. So I went for the lighter green in the end. I had opted for a darker green to begin with, just because I need it to offset and show up against the dark grey for the colour work, and I didn't want it to blend in too much and be too close. I'm not sure what combination or in what order I'm going to knit these together for the shawl, but I will wind them up and decide once I actually get to cast on. I'll probably try and finish my Sophie shawl first of all, so that I'm not knitting two shawls at the same time as well. Yeah, and I'm excited to finally be knitting that project. I think I bought the pattern a year and a half ago. I actually got it because I did a test knit for Fibre Tales for Lerga. Recommend her podcast as well, although she doesn't podcast as often these days as she used to. And yeah, I got a free pattern as a result of doing a test knit for her. So I'm excited to figure out how to steek properly in terms of actually knitting the shawl in the round and then cutting open to reveal it in all its glory. I think that's a fascinating way of putting together a pattern and preventing you from having to knit colour work in the pearl rows rather than just knitting in the knit rows. So they're my plans for the future in terms of knitting. I'm going to just talk about a couple of other things that I've been getting on with as well. So first of all, I have been weaving again. Now, I have not done any weaving for a ridiculous amount of time. I think the last thing I wove was some fabric, which I then sewed into a bag, which is now holding the leftovers of my Carapins. So it's been a long time. And I thought, you know what, I want to use up some of this leftover stuff that I have and actually do a bit more weaving and a bit more sewing with my woven fabric, which I have really enjoyed in the past. So I'm trying to show you this, but this is what I have been doing. So this is Chopel Starker 6, and one of the two is a kind of plain green. The other one is this kind of variegated sort of multicoloured yarn, a bit like the Crazy Zalba ball, but this is all in sport weight, which I do prefer to work with. And I'm really enjoying it again. So this is a rigid heddle loom. I bought this second hand from the British Heart Foundation in the UK and got it a bit cheaper than it would be to buy new. And it's not massively expensive to get, especially when you compare it to things like spinning wheels that have a lot of moving parts and a lot of technical expertise going into creating them. This is quite a simple loom. It is a 16-inch, I think. You can get larger ones. You can also get stands for them, which can be quite helpful. But I get on really well with this little one because it means I can still sit on the sofa and weave with this. It's small enough that I can do that. And I'm just doing a really simple plain weave, but what I'm trying to highlight is the kind of colour changing element of the yarn. What I want to do next is actually weave with some of my hand spun and see how that looks. So I have a fair bit left of the colour changing yarn to use up here, but then what I'm going to do next is just test out some of my hand spun yarn on the same kind of warp that I've set up here and see how it looks. I am starting to amass quite a lot of hand spun, so I need to find uses for them, otherwise I'm just going to end up drowning in yarn. And one of my aims for this year is really to make sure I am making use of my hand dyed and hand spun yarn, not just creating something and then popping it away somewhere and never actually using it for a project, because that seems a shame. I have a lot of hand dyed yarn that I've dyed myself and a lot of hand spun building up, so we shall see how that mission goes. And that allows me to swiftly also move on to what I have been spinning recently. So I have a Ladybug spinning wheel by Shacked. I got it as a kind of one-off purchase that I allowed myself to have because I'd got a bonus from work, and it was from Weft Blown and it had been used as a shop kind of prop to demonstrate how people should spin. So I got it a little bit cheaper than it would be if it was absolutely brand new. But if you are after a spinning wheel, there are lots of groups on Ravelry that you can look into, and they will help find spinning wheels. Some have some for sale. Same with looms actually. If you want a weaving loom, there's a weavers group for the UK on Ravelry. There's also a spinning group on Ravelry where they often sell or trade things there. I keep an eye out all the time. I've not spotted anything that I want yet. So I have a separate video talking about my advent calendar, which is a fibre advent calendar, and I have a few that I've set aside to spin next. So these come in a whopping 50 grams each. So I'm going to have, what's that, 24 times 50. A lot of wool to spin. This is number 2. So I picked out 5 specifically to start with. This one was day 19. This one is day 22. Golds and the blues. And this one was day 23. There you go. And I was very excited to start spinning some of this, so I have begun. And I opted to start with this one, which was my day 9. Let's see if the sparkles come out on here. There you go, you can start to see it. So this fibre is called Reindeer Poop, and it's basically a kind of dark grey colour with lots of little copper strands of sparkle stellina in there. And I'm having fun spinning this up. I've spun 25 grams already onto a bobbin, and then I am currently spinning the other portion. So that's looking like this. Hopefully you can see there. It doesn't look all that interesting right now, but I bet it'll be really nice when it's plied up in 2-ply yarn for me to knit with. But yeah, very excited to get on with that. What I'll probably end up doing is, as I spin through the advent, I'll be kind of asking some of my friends if they want to have some of the yarn, because it's not all my cup of tea, but I've picked out the 5 that I'm most excited to spin first of all, and having lots of fun with that. And it doesn't take very long to spin up 50 grams of fibre, and yeah, I spin quite thin now, so I'm probably thinking I'm going to get a sport or 4-ply out of this, so quite fine. So that always takes longer than thicker, bulkier yarn, but really enjoying it. I absolutely enjoyed opening it over the festive period as well, and I'm interested in trying out some of those more unusual fibres that came up in the advent calendar. I also got some Christmas presents from my husband, which are yarn related but are not yarn. So I just wanted to showcase those. The first one is a Phlox kind of stitch keeper or cable needle, depending on what you want to use it for. It can be used as a stitch holder, a stitch marker, a drop stitch fixer, a seam baster, or a cable needle. He got me this one, which is Moon Dancer in black and white from Beehive yarns in the UK, but I think they can be bought in a lot of places now. They are made in Vermont. So that was one thing that I got. I also got a load of other little progress keepers from my husband. Some of them are on project, so you'll have seen I had a pumpkin on my November vest that was also part of this set. He got me a little Christmas tree. Okay, I'm hoping you can see that, which I used over the Christmas period, and a bunch of acorns. And these are from Koru Clay Studio, which is an Etsy shop that I'll link to in the description below. The acorns are absolutely adorable. There you go, 3 different colours in a set. Really nice little things. And then I also have a ghost and a wizard's hat that are also being kept on projects already. So yeah, I was really happy to have those little tiny things from my husband, and not yarn. I was not requesting yarn. So yeah, something I'm going to be really mindful of this year is not buying yarn for the sake of it or because it looks pretty. That's going to be tough, but I'll be knitting from stash and using up some of my own creations as well. my battery is flashing, so I will say goodbye now. Thank you so much for watching to the end, and I hope to see you in a couple of weeks when I have a chance to record again. Please do like and subscribe if you can, and for now, have a lovely crafty time and speak to you soon. Bye.